Welcome to the Borderlands of Kansas, 1932, where the plains stretch endlessly under a moonless sky, silent and heavy, pressing against your ears as if the world itself is holding its breath. And then, a shadow the size of a horse ripples across the tall prairie grass, moving faster than any animal should, faster than logic allows. Witnesses would later swear their lanterns flickered, horses shied, and the wind carried whispers, not of this world whispers that chilled the blood. Eyewitness accounts filed in the Haskell County Sheriff's Ledger describe something impossible, shoulders towering above the average stallion. Eyes glowing amber, in the dark teeth, unnaturally long muscles moving with uncanny precision. No one dared approach. No one could. Local farmers noted huge prints in the damp soil spaced far apart. Some clawed, some hoof-like, stretching for miles without interruption. While letters to the Wichita Daily News echoed the same descriptions, signed or anonymous, all recounting a phantom that vanished when pursued, yet left fear in its wake. Dogs refused to bark, lanterns. Shattered men tumbled from wagons in terror, moments of disbelief transforming into dread. The Kansas State Agricultural Board archived several testimonies from 1931 to 1933, recording livestock missing fences, torn and terrified horses. Official explanations suggested unusually large wolves or coyotes, yet the sheer size, speed, and audacity of the creature defied nature. Folk tales whispered of ghost wolves, of the plains creatures crossing the line between beast and legend, harbingers of misfortune, spirits of the frontier, warning those who dared to wander. And before we go any deeper, pause for a moment and leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening, because in stories like these, every perspective matters. Every observation adds weight to the impossibility, and every eyewitness marks a point along the border where reality and folklore collided. The truth you are about to witness will challenge everything you think you know about the wilds of Kansas. Sometimes the most unbelievable truths hide in plain sight, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to witness them. The phantom wolf waits patient, massive unseen, until it has felt a heartbeat in the darkness, a ripple across the plains, an echo that refuses to be silenced. A shadow that moves like a horse, yet belongs to no law of nature known to man. April 1932. The Kansas borderlands stretched endlessly beneath a cold gray sky. The kind of sky that presses down on the horizon, flattening the prairie, turning every blade of grass into a shadow, every wind gust into a whisper. The earth here is ancient, scarred by decades of settlement grazing and drought. And yet in its openness, it harbors secrets older than any settler's ledger, older than the wooden fence posts that mark the boundaries of cattle pastures. The borderlands were sparsely populated, dotted with farmhouses, windmills turning lazily, and narrow dirt roads that curled like veins through the golden grass. The land seemed benign, even mundane at first glance. But beneath this calm, there was a tension, a sense that the plains themselves were aware of every footstep, every horse hoof, every human breath that dared traverse them. Ranchers who lived along the Cimarron River reported that mornings were filled with the sound of dew dripping from prairie grass, the whistle of wind through the hollows. Birds that should have sung had fallen silent. Even the dogs, normally boisterous, remained uneasy ears, perked muscles tensed. And this was not imagination. Agricultural inspectors from the Kansas State Board recorded anomalous disturbances in livestock behavior, mows refusing to enter pastures. Sheep huddled unnaturally close, their bleats sharp and frantic, horses prancing nervously along fence lines. Official memos note that these behaviors coincided with reported sightings of the phantom wolf. The connection seemed absurd at first. The dimensions described, shoulders higher than an average horse, limbs long, agile, did not match any known predator of the plains. Yet farmers, ranchers, and wandering drovers repeated these descriptions with unnerving consistency. Letters sent to the Wichita Daily News, to the Topeka capital, all described a shadow larger than life, moving faster than logic, allowed sometimes appearing in the distance, sometimes vanishing completely, like smoke carried by the wind, like a ripple in reality itself. The month of April brought with it frequent storms. Lightning fractured the sky in violent white streaks. Thunder rolled across the flatlands in deep, resonant booms. The wind, often a gentle companion, turned unpredictable. It carried scents across miles, scents that unsettled the livestock scents that human noses could not always identify. In these moments, the borderlands seemed transformed. Every mound of earth, every hollow, every rise became a potential vantage point. And yet it was during these storms that the wolf was most often reported. Witnesses claimed it moved with an uncanny awareness of the environment, dodging wind currents, slipping between pools of lightning, its massive frame blending seamlessly into the shadows. Folklore here speaks of the windwalker, a creature that obeys no law but that of the plains themselves. Ranchers, some devout, others skeptical, murmured prayers or shook their heads in disbelief, unsure if what they saw was flesh and bone, or the manifestation of frontier spirits, a warning to those who strayed too far from the safety of hearth and home. Sheriff's records from Haskell County describe encounters that read more like myth than official report. On April 14, 1932, a rancher named Samuel Hargrove reported seeing the creature at dusk. He was accompanied by his hired hand, a young man named Lewis McCarthy. The entry notes that both men froze as the wolf, impossibly large, paused atop a small rise, eyes amber reflecting the lantern light. Hargrove fired a single shot, but the creature vanished before the sound even faded. Tracks discovered afterward measured over 18 inches in length, spaced unnaturally far apart, and claw marks gouged into the soft earth suggested force far exceeding any known wolf. The report concludes with the observation neither man could explain, nor did they attempt to follow. Letters to newspapers repeated the same narrative, observers frightened, astounded, haunted by the sheer size and presence of a creature that seemed to exist beyond ordinary nature. These documents, archived in local libraries, paint a consistent image, a predator or something like it, dominating the environment, not by aggression alone, but by the very impossibility of its existence. The prairie itself played a role in shaping perception. Rolling hills, tall grasses, and dry creek beds created optical illusions, shadows that lengthened and shifted unpredictably. In the folklore of the region, such features were often attributed to spirits of the land. The Kiowa and Pawnee peoples had long warned settlers of the plains guardians, creatures larger than men, that moved silently unseen. In the 1930s, these legends were not forgotten. Older residents whispered to newcomers about the ghost wolf of Cimarron, a warning wrapped in mystery, a creature whose appearance marked upheaval, disappearance, or misfortune. Children were kept indoors after sunset. Lanterns were lit early. Yet the wolf, according to reports, ignored fences, roads, and human presence. It traversed borders as if they did not exist, its presence alone reshaping the perception of distance and scale across the borderlands. Spring 1932 was harsh, dry winds alternating with sudden rain. Reports indicate that the phantom wolf was sighted during both extremes. Farmers noted hoof-like prints in wet soil after rainfall. Yet in dry, dusty stretches they found clawed impressions that seemed to dig into the earth with intent. Livestock remained uneasy. Dogs cowered, and humans found themselves questioning the limits of reality. The Kansas State Agricultural Board compiled records showing hundreds of missing or mutilated animals. Some blamed coyotes, others blamed natural predators. But witnesses insisted the size, speed, and coordination of the predator could not be natural. Their testimonies cross-referenced with weather reports, sunrise and sunset times, and lunar cycles show remarkable consistency. Dusk and dawn remained the wolf's preferred hunting window. Periods when shadows stretched long across the plains. Periods when the veil between the natural and the supernatural seemed thinnest. Observers described the landscape in meticulous detail. Rolling prairie punctuated with isolated windmills, cattle grazing in small clusters, dirt roads winding past wooden homesteads, all beneath skies streaked with shifting clouds, moonlight filtering faintly through gaps, creating pools of dim illumination that the wolf could exploit. Fences, meager as they were, did not hinder its movement. Tracks crisscrossed fields as if the creature ignored conventional paths. Folklore layer tells of eyes glowing like amber lanterns, of breaths visible in the cold air, of a presence that could bend wind and silence nature itself. Eyewitnesses recall moments where time seemed to dilate, seconds stretching into minutes. And the wolf remained, always present, never fully understood. A reminder that the plains, though tamed by homesteads, cattle, and roads, remained wild at heart. The borderlands in April were alive with more than human activity. Hawks circled high above their cries, slicing the quiet. Coyotes howled at night, often joined by the wolf's own untraceable howls, though pitch and depth were unlike any known canine. Human movement was restricted, wary. Some nights, ranchers huddled by stoves, lanterns casting elongated shadows across wooden floors as the wind rattled window panes. They listened for a sound, any sound, that might betray the phantom's location. Yet the wolf was patient, methodical, appearing only when it chose, leaving no trail but for impossible tracks. And the fear it inspired became a part of daily life. A rhythm, a pulse, the very air thick with expectation and unease. Towns and farms alike acknowledged silently that something extraordinary had invaded the plains, something that blurred the lines between predator and legend. By late April, reports had multiplied. Neighboring counties documented similar sightings. Letters, telegrams, and oral accounts described the creature's movements along a broad swath of the western Kansas borderlands. Communities began to speak in hushed tones of its size, its speed, its near-intelligent cunning. The phantom wolf of Kansas was no longer a rumor. It had become a legend in real time. A presence felt as much as seen. The landscape itself, prairie riverbeds, wind-blown hills, formed the stage for its silent dominion. The plains were no longer empty. Every shadow, every gust of wind, every flicker of lantern light could conceal a giant beast. And yet, it was often the simplest sightings that left the deepest impressions, a lone figure silhouetted on a rise, a massive paw print beside a fence, a fleeting amber eye glinting in the dusk, each fragment combining into an image too large, too impossible to ignore. The people of Kansas, for all their resilience, felt the weight of an unseen force. Reports indicate that families adapted. Children were kept close, animals penned early, and hunters who ventured too far returned with stories of silence broken only by a rustle of grass, a movement too swift to track, and an understanding dawning slowly. The borderlands themselves had changed. They were now territory shared, between human settlers, livestock, and a creature whose scale and presence challenged the very laws of nature. And the stories carefully recorded in county ledgers, newspaper archives, and personal letters would endure, weaving together fact, folklore, and the palpable sense of fear that gripped every homestead, every ridge, every stretch of open prairie, a tension that stretched across miles, carried by wind whispered through grass, and seen in fleeting glimpses by those brave enough or unlucky enough to witness it. By May of 1932, the phenomenon of the so-called phantom wolf had become impossible to ignore. Official records, though sparse, began to accumulate in county ledgers, farm journals, and correspondence with the Kansas State Agricultural Board. One particular report dated May 3rd, filed by Sheriff Henry Caldwell of Haskell County, described footprints measured at 18.5 inches long, spaced almost 7 feet apart. Claw marks pressed into the soil with a depth of nearly 2 inches, inconsistent with any known species of North American wolf or coyote. Caldwell noted that the ground surrounding the impressions was flattened as if by a massive weight. Yet no other disturbance, no overturned fences, no broken branches was observed, suggesting a creature capable of both immense power and astonishing control. He remarked in his ledger, "The scale of this predator defies all explanation. It is larger than any natural animal and moves with intelligence beyond instinct." Across the borderlands, agricultural inspectors corroborated these accounts. Monthly livestock reports indicated a significant uptick in missing animals during March and April. 47 head of cattle vanished in one isolated area of Haskell County, leaving only scattered hoof and paw impressions. Sheep losses in neighboring counties totaled 63 in 2 months, all under circumstances inconsistent with common predators. A veterinarian, Dr. William Thompson of Dodge City, was consulted to analyze remains of partially attacked livestock. He noted puncture wounds far exceeding normal wolf bite force. Jaw strength required to crush bones in the manner observed was estimated to be over 2,500 psi, far greater than any known predator in the region. He recorded in his report, "There is no known animal in Kansas capable of delivering the damage observed. The size, the force, the precision, it is beyond comprehension." Local newspapers carried multiple accounts. The Wichita Daily News ran a headline on May 10th. "Giant wolf stalks Borderlands. Farmers alarmed by shadow creature." Letters poured in, many anonymous detailing consistent observations. A massive wolf moving like a shadow appearing at twilight, or dawn vanishing when approached, leaving prints and damage beyond natural explanation. One anonymous letter described the wolf running alongside a windmill stride, matching the height of the structure's lowest beams, a distance of nearly 150 feet in a single bound. The reporter noted the eyewitness's trembling hand, the detail repeated by neighbors who claimed they too saw the creature in the same vicinity. Across Kansas, similar reports were filed, empirical data intersecting folklore, each observation reinforcing the narrative. Footprints, measured speed, calculated range estimated, all pointing to a predator or entity far exceeding the norms of the animal kingdom. Meteorological records intersect strangely with sightings. Nights with heavy wind and low humidity correlated with the majority of reports. On April 22nd, Haskell County recorded a temperature drop of 14 degrees within 3 hours, wind gusts exceeding 35 miles per hour. In the same time frame, 2 ranchers reported simultaneous sightings nearly 10 miles apart, describing the wolf as the size of a horse and moving with unnatural stealth. Scientific analysis of the region's terrain shows that no natural predator could traverse such distances undetected, particularly given the visibility of open plains and the sparse cover. Observers remarked on how the wolf seemed to anticipate their movements, a phenomenon documented repeatedly, creating an unnerving sense that it was aware of human presence before humans themselves were aware of it. Sheriff Caldwell wrote, "I have never witnessed an animal with such apparent intelligence. It is as if it knows we are here, yet we do not know where it lies." Folklore layer intertwined seamlessly. Stories passed down through local families reference a creature called the Cimarron Shadow, predating settlement by decades. Native oral traditions preserved in WPA interviews of the late 1930s describe a guardian of the plains, a wolf larger than life, moving with the speed of wind and the cunning of men. The convergence of these stories with contemporary eyewitness reports is striking. Ranchers unfamiliar with native folklore nonetheless described the wolf's behavior in eerily similar terms. It was silent. It was omnipresent. It seemed to mock human understanding. The perception of scale, speed, and threat became part of the lived experience. Families noted changes in routines. Cattle herds moved earlier. Children were kept inside after dusk. Lanterns lit long before nightfall. The borderlands themselves became a theater of anticipation and unease, a living backdrop to an entity both real and unreal. Detailed measurements were taken by curious townsfolk attempting to document evidence. Tracks photographed with yardsticks for scale claw impressions, cast in plaster distances between sightings mapped. Analysis revealed stride lengths exceeding 10 feet a speed, estimated at nearly 40 miles per hour in open fields. No known North American predator of 1930s Kansas could achieve these dimensions or velocity. Wildlife experts of the era expressed incredulity. Letters from the Kansas Fish and Game Commission in June 1932 stated, "Should this creature exist as described, it defies classification within known zoology. Reports will be catalogued, but skepticism remains warranted." Yet the consistency of witness testimony is troubling. The line between plausible predator and myth began to blur, leaving historians and scientists alike grappling with evidence that was simultaneously tangible and inexplicable. Eyewitness testimonies often included behavioral anomalies. The wolf reportedly displayed patterns inconsistent with hunting or predation alone. In multiple incidents, livestock were left untouched, while humans or other animals fled. One account from a ranch near Cimarron noted the wolf observing workers from atop a ridge for over 10 minutes before disappearing into the twilight. Human reactions, panic, awe, disbelief were nearly identical across observers separated by miles. The synchronization of narrative distance and environment lends credence to the argument that the phenomenon was consistent, not anecdotal. Newspapers published diagrams of the paw prints, sketches of the creature as described by witnesses, all corroborating size, proportion, and movement. Forensic-style reporting in letters from Kansas State Agricultural Board staff highlighted the improbability. The prints, the stride, the claw marks, the spatial awareness, all impossible for any known species, all systematically recorded. The intersection of folklore and hard data is particularly striking in this region. WPA interviews collected from descendants of settlers, ranchers, and native communities detail similar phenomena decades prior. Stories of enormous wolves patrolling borderlands, silently observing humans, leaving only impressions on the ground, echoing through family narratives. When cross-referenced with sheriff's reports, newspaper accounts, and weather logs, a pattern emerges. Sightings cluster around specific terrain features, riverbeds, rises, and windmill perimeters. The creature's movement seems adaptive, almost strategic, selecting terrain for maximum visibility or concealment. Whether explained as folklore or documented observation, the evidence compels attention. Tangible prints, missing livestock, consistent descriptions. The convergence is undeniable. A factual layer that grounds the legend, forcing the mind to confront the impossibility. By the end of May 1932, the phantom wolf was no longer a rumor confined to whispers around homesteads. It had become a documented phenomenon. Empirical data measurements, photographs, veterinary analyses, meteorological correlations intersected with eyewitness narrative. The creature's presence had measurable impact on human behavior, animal movement, and the landscape itself. Yet even with this factual grounding, stories of its speed, size, and uncanny intelligence imbued it with mythic qualities. Ranchers called it a shadow. Observers called it a ghost. Letters to editors implored readers to beware. The creature existed simultaneously in the tangible record and the folklore consciousness of Kansas. Fact and legend became inseparable. And the plains, open, unforgiving, and endlessly wide, remained a stage for something that was both impossible and undeniably real. It was just past twilight on a late April evening, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and prairie grass. The wind whispered through the hollows, carrying with it the faint, unsettling echoes of distant coyotes. Samuel Hargrove, a middle-aged rancher with weathered hands and a stooped frame from years of labor, adjusted his lantern, its flickering light casting long shadows across the uneven ground. Beside him, Lewis McCarthy, a young hired hand barely 20, gripped the reins of his horse tightly. Knuckles' white eyes darting toward the rolling hills beyond their property line. They had heard the stories. Whispers from neighboring homesteads, tales of shadows moving larger than life. But the reality of standing on the plains themselves, feeling the vast emptiness around them, brought a new tangible tension, a fear that settled deep into the bones. Every rustle of grass, every snapping twig, became a potential signal. And then, the movement began. Subtle at first, a ripple in the tall prairie grass. Distant, almost imperceptible yet distinct. Hargrove froze. Breath caught. The lantern swung slightly, and then they saw it. A wolf. No ordinary wolf. A creature that loomed above them, shoulders higher than any horse they had ever seen. Muscles rippling with an impossible grace. Amber eyes catching the dim light, glowing like twin lanterns focused on them. A low, resonant growl, more felt than heard, rolled across the plains, vibrating through the soil, through their very feet. McCarthy's horse shied violently, rearing back, and in that instant the two men understood the stories were true. It existed. It was real. The creature moved with a deliberateness, a cunning awareness, pausing on a rise just beyond the fence line, its massive form blending into the shadows, yet impossible to ignore. Hargrove reached for his rifle, hands shaking, sweat beading along his temple. He raised the weapon, aimed, fired a single shot. The sound cracked through the stillness, yet before the echo faded, the wolf vanished. No sound, no trace. It was as if it had melted into the night itself. In the aftermath, Hargrove and McCarthy scanned the ground. Enormous paw prints. Deep claw marks pressed into the soil, spanning nearly 7 feet from one to the next. The impressions ended abruptly, continuing into nothing. The young man whispered, voice trembling, Where did it go?" Hargrove said nothing. He merely stared at the horizon, the lantern light trembling in the wind, knowing that whatever had walked the plains tonight was beyond their comprehension, beyond capture, beyond human law. Nearby livestock reacted unpredictably. Cows lowed nervously, stamping hooves. Sheep huddled together, bleating sharply. The human's presence seemed insignificant in comparison to the creature's influence. McCarthy noticed the wind shift. A cold, unnatural gust that carried an earthy scent, musky, familiar, yet alien. It seemed to announce the wolf's continued presence, though it remained unseen. Hargrove murmured, recalling old frontier tales, stories of the Windwalker, ghost wolves that patrolled the plain spirits of the land itself. Lewis shivered, unsure whether to dismiss the tale or feel its truth. But as they examined the prints and claw marks, and as the moonlight briefly illuminated a distant ridge, both men felt the weight of history pressing down. A sense that this land had always been watched, always had guardians larger than life. As they moved cautiously along the fence line, lanterns casting trembling shadows, another movement caught their eyes. The wolf, or something like it, emerged from a shallow creek bed. The stride, the sheer bulk, the fluidity of motion all defied natural explanation. Yet the observers could not turn away. Hearts pounding, they followed at a distance, careful to remain unnoticed. The creature paused atop a knoll, head raised, ears pricked, eyes fixed on them. And then it crouched. A predatory awareness, unlike anything they had ever experienced. For several long minutes, the wind carried only silence. And then, as if sensing their inevitability, it disappeared again, leaving only impressions in the soil. Shadows stretched long across the plains, and the human witnesses were left with adrenaline awe and a profound creeping dread. Letters written later to the Wichita Daily News described similar human encounters. The wolf did not attack unless provoked. Yet its presence alone instilled fear, Descriptions emphasize intelligence, its awareness of human movement, an uncanny ability to appear and vanish at will. Some writers speculated it was a natural predator. Others whispered that it was a spirit, a manifestation of the plains themselves. Older settlers nodded knowingly, recounting the tales passed from native tribes. The Kiowa and Pawnee spoke of enormous guardians, wolves that observed humans teaching respect for the land. And for those in 1932 standing on the plains, as the shadow passed, the folklore was no longer stories. It was lived experience, tangible, terrifying, and real. McCarthy later recounted the sound of its breathing, low, deliberate, reverberating across the creek bed, the rustle of grass as it moved, the subtle snapping of twigs under massive paws, each detail etched in memory. Hargrove documented the tracks in his journal, 18 inches long, deep claw marks, stride lengths unmatched, distances impossible. The data alone suggested a creature defying natural law. Yet the emotional weight, fear, awe, disbelief was equally powerful. They noted that even in the daytime, the plains seemed altered. An awareness that the wolf had been there lingered. The wind carried it. The birds sensed it. The livestock reacted instinctively. Humans too internalized it. And the story spread. Neighbors spoke in whispers. Children dared not venture too far from homes. Lanterns were lit early. The human element became inseparable from the creature itself. The phantom wolf reshaped not only the land but human behavior. The folklore became inseparable from observed fact. Even scientific observers were forced to acknowledge anomalies. Veterinarians and local inspectors noted unusual livestock injuries, depth and spread of claw marks inconsistent with known predators, stride length and track size exceeding any natural animal in Kansas. Reports compiled in county archives, Caldwell's Ledger, Agricultural Board communications outlined the statistical improbability. The creature's intelligence, awareness, and movement patterns were noted alongside every fact. Eyewitness testimony, physical evidence, and folklore combined, creating a human perspective rooted in both tangible reality and the ineffable. The experience of Hargrove and McCarthy became archetypal. A case study repeated across the borderlands, a narrative blending human fear-wonder and the factual impossibility of what they had witnessed. By the end of that evening, the two men returned home. Lanterns dimming muscles, tense minds racing. They recounted every detail. The prints, the amber eyes, the paws atop the ridge. The feeling that the land itself had shifted, and the wolf's presence remained. Palpable, unseen, unforgettable. A force shaping human perception, embedding itself into memory and record alike. The borderlands had become a stage for something far greater than any human confrontation. A living legend grounded in human experience. Fact and folklore interwoven, palpable, undeniable. And for those who witnessed it firsthand, forever haunting the edge of reason. By early June 1932, the reports of the phantom wolf had escalated beyond isolated accounts. The Kansas State Agricultural Board compiled over 50 independent sightings in Haskell, Gray, and Finney counties. Investigators compared measurements of paw prints, stride lengths, and claw impressions. Average paw length measured 18.5 inches. Maximum stride length exceeded 10 feet, distances consistent across multiple locations. Veterinary reports analyzed the depth of claw marks, 2 inches in firm soil requiring force, estimated beyond any known North American predator. The numbers alone were staggering. A creature capable of outproducing every natural wolf in size. Outflanking humans and livestock with intelligence and precision. Outmaneuvering every attempt at pursuit, impossible yet documented. And the consistency of observation defied coincidence. The newspapers ran front-page articles. The Dodge City Daily Globe published diagrams showing tracks mapped over 12 miles. Reports included precise timing, environmental conditions, and witness statements. On June 5th, the Ledger from Haskell County detailed a combined observation. 3 ranchers across 2 ridges witnessed the wolf simultaneously. Timing angle and estimated speed calculated to over 35 miles per hour. No natural predator could cover such distance in open terrain without detection. And yet it happened, repeated, consistently. The phantom wolf was not random. It was systematic, precise, astonishingly aware of human activity. And this pattern continued throughout the month. Folklore accounts aligned uncannily with these facts. Older settlers recounted stories of a windwalker, a guardian of the plains, appearing to test humans, observe livestock, and disappear. WPA interviews from 1936 and 1937 collected oral histories from descendants of ranchers and native communities. The descriptions matched contemporary observations with remarkable accuracy. Stride size, speed behavior, amber eyes reflecting lantern light. The wolf seemed to adhere to a script written long before settlers arrived. And in combining this folklore with measured data, the creature became both real and legendary simultaneously. A living enigma, outproduced in size, outsmarted in stealth, outflanked in maneuverability. Meteorological records continued to corroborate witness observations. June brought clear nights with sharp temperature swings. On the 12th, wind gusts reached 40 miles per hour. Lightning flashed intermittently across the plains. Yet in this chaos, multiple sightings were recorded. The wolf moved unimpeded. A figure so large it cast shadows over fence lines and water troughs. Yet it was ghost-like in its unpredictability. Livestock behavior again confirmed a pattern. Sheep and cattle clustered unnaturally. Horses reared and stamped. Human observers adjusted routines accordingly. Lights illuminated earlier. Patrols intensified. The creature dictated the rhythm of daily life, an undeniable feedback loop between predator and environment, fact and folklore, human perception and statistical measurement, intertwined. Scientific observers attempted further analysis. Dr. William Thompson and 2 veterinary assistants documented claw force, jaw strength, and estimated mass. Calculations suggested a jaw capable of over 2,500 psi, mass exceeding 400 pounds, muscular structure unmatched by known species. Stride analysis indicated capability to cover distances exceeding any wolf or coyote. Speed calculations placed it between 35 to 40 miles per hour. Repeated observations by multiple witnesses confirmed these figures. Sheriff Caldwell noted in his June 15th ledger, "These figures alone suggest an animal or entity beyond known classification. Intelligence, speed, and size combine to form a predator beyond our comprehension." The facts, unfortunately, are indisputable. Correspondents from neighboring counties detailed similar phenomena. Gray County ranchers noted the wolf crossing 3 miles of open prairie in under 5 minutes. Each observation consistent with prior calculations. The creature seemed to anticipate human positioning, appearing, disappearing, and reappearing with precise timing. Observers felt watched, tracked, outflanked by an intelligence beyond instinct. Even attempts to corner it failed. Traps, scent lines, and mounted pursuits were ineffective. Reports stated repeatedly that the wolf avoided confrontation, yet dominated the terrain. It dictated movement, dictated attention, dictated fear, outsmarted, outproduced, outflanked. A phrase repeated in letters, ledgers, and newspaper editorials. A refrain underscoring the unnatural reality. Eyewitness patterns demonstrated remarkable consistency. Size, movement, and behavior mirrored across Haskell, Gray, and Finney counties. Simultaneous observations corroborated timing, distance, and environmental conditions. The creature's presence influenced local culture. Children told to remain indoors after dusk, livestock fed early. Lanterns lit hours before darkness. Every aspect of human life adapted. Even folklore evolved. The Windwalker narrative expanded. Details from ranchers and native traditions merged with contemporary observation. The creature became a hybrid of fact and legend, statistical anomaly and cultural archetype. The plains itself acknowledged its dominion. Shadows seemed longer. Winds carried intent. Grass rustled differently, and human perception was calibrated to its presence. In some instances, the wolf displayed behaviors not associated with predation. Livestock left untouched, observers ignored, moving silently, almost theatrically. An intelligence, a strategy, repeated across multiple locations, documented meticulously. Distance measurements, timing, environmental conditions, all recorded. Some letters included sketches, diagrams, scale notes. Photographic attempts yielded blurred images, only shadows reinforcing its spectral reputation. The evidence, when compiled, created a pattern impossible to reconcile with natural predators. Calculations, measurements, and eyewitness consistency, all pointing to an entity that defied classification. By late June, the phantom wolf had become a measured phenomenon, not a rumor, not folklore alone. Tracked quantitatively across counties, stride length, speed, mass, jaw, strength, claw depth. Repeated observations confirmed a creature that outproduced every natural wolf, outflanked every attempt to observe, outsmarted every human who dared approach. Yet folklore maintained a voice, a layer reminding witnesses of the Windwalker, the guardian, the ghost of the plains. Reality and myth merged seamlessly. The plains had become a stage for the extraordinary, an impossible creature documented with precision, its presence embedded in both fact and imagination. And the people of Kansas were forced to reconcile both numerical certainty and supernatural awe. Reports concluded with summaries cross-referencing meteorological, zoological, and witness data. Each incident meticulously noted. Patterns emerged. The creature preferred ridgelines, riverbeds, windmill vicinities. Speed and timing consistent. Behavior purposeful. The wolf defined the rhythm of life across the borderlands. Humans adapted. Folklore persisted. Reality quantified. And the phantom wolf remained, outsmarting, outproducing, outflanking, leaving a trail of evidence and terror, a statistical impossibility, a legend firmly grounded in measurable fact, undeniable, yet elusive, simultaneously ghost and predator, shaping the Kansas plains in both perception and truth. By July of 1932, the presence of the phantom wolf had transcended the realm of rumor and anecdote. It had become an undeniable force shaping life across the western Kansas borderlands. Communities adjusted their rhythms, daily routines, and even the architecture of vigilance itself in response to an entity that defied classification. Ranchers fortified fences. Lanterns were hung higher and lit earlier. Livestock were herded more tightly. Yet these measures only highlighted the stark reality. Human strategies were insufficient. Attempts at pursuit failed. Every trap, every patrol, every attempt to corner or observe the creature was met with null results. And slowly, an unsettling understanding settled over both settlers and officials alike. They had been outsmarted, outflanked, and consistently outproduced by a force beyond their comprehension. Sheriff Henry Caldwell, who had meticulously documented sightings, tracks, and witness statements, wrote in his ledger, "We had underestimated the scale, underestimated the intelligence, underestimated the patience. The plains themselves have become a stage for something beyond law, reason, or expectation. Our patrols, our rifles, our calculations, all are insufficient against what moves here unseen." His words echo through the historical record, a candid acknowledgement that human perception and preparedness were inadequate. The wolf had imposed its own order upon the borderlands, a dominion invisible, yet profoundly tangible. Communities felt the psychological weight of this reality. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every distant gust of wind became potentially meaningful. Livestock behaved unpredictably, signaling danger that humans could not detect directly. Dogs refused to bark at nothing, yet shivered in anticipation. Farmers hesitated before stepping outside. Children were kept close to hearth and home. Even the most experienced ranchers accustomed to harsh weather predators and the occasional coyote found themselves unnerved, and yet, amid fear, there was also awe. An acute awareness of the plains' vastness, its capacity for concealment, and the phantom wolf's dominance within it. The foxglove-lined riverbeds, wind-swept ridges, and rolling prairie hills became stages for countless encounters, some brief, almost incidental. Others protracted, tense, and vivid. One rancher, writing to the Wichita Daily News, recounted standing atop a low ridge as the wolf paused atop a distant rise. Amber eyes reflecting the dying light, head tilted, observing without aggression, as if measuring human comprehension itself. Every minute felt stretched, elongated, an eternity compressed into seconds. The observer felt both insignificant and intrusively scrutinized. And when the wolf vanished into shadows, leaving only the faintest impressions in the soil, the emotional impact persisted. A lingering recognition that human understanding was not sufficient to encompass the phenomena witnessed. Scientific observers, including Dr. William Thompson, analyzed physical evidence in tandem with eyewitness accounts. Paw prints measured consistently 18 to 19 inches, stride lengths surpassing 10 feet, claw impressions 2 inches deep. Calculations suggested a creature mass exceeding 400 pounds, jaw strength over 2,500 psi speed, across open prairie estimated at 35 to 40 miles per hour. All empirical measures confirmed impossibility. Yet, behavioral analysis revealed deliberate avoidance of humans. Strategic positioning along ridges, selective engagement with livestock, and adaptive movement patterns. The wolf was a predator in function, but something more in perception. Intelligence and awareness intertwined with raw physicality. And the confluence of data created a paradox, undeniable evidence of existence paired with phenomena beyond known zoological law. Folklore provided a lens to interpret these extraordinary facts. WPA interviews collected decades later reveal the persistence of tales about the windwalker, a guardian spirit of the plains. Enormous, silent, moving faster than sight. The alignment between these oral traditions and measured observations is striking. Witnesses with no knowledge of native lore describe behaviors, proportions, and movements almost identically. The phantom wolf became simultaneously real and mythic, empirical, and legendary. A creature that existed in both recorded fact and human imagination. The plains themselves, open, unforgiving, and vast, served as both stage and witness. The wind carried its presence, shadows elongated unnaturally. Grass and soil bore tangible evidence of passage, and human memory recorded each instance with reverence and fear. The broader implications were profound. The phantom wolf dictated the rhythm of life across counties. Human mobility, livestock management, and perception of safety were all constrained. Even local law enforcement adapted strategies. Patrol routes were revised, observation times adjusted, and communication increased between neighboring ranchers. Yet each intervention reinforced the creature's dominance. It had outsmarted every human attempt to anticipate its movement, outflanked every patrol and observation, outproduced all natural predators in size, speed, and capacity to evade capture. And these repeated outcomes created a shared understanding. The borderlands were a domain equally shared between humans, domesticated animals, and the wolf. Emotional testimonies highlight this impact vividly. Ranchers described the sensation of being watched, fleeting glimpses of amber eyes through tall grass, shadows shifting unexpectedly. A presence felt before seen. The psychological imprint persisted. Even when the wolf remained unseen, its prior passage influenced decisions. Families rearranged routines. Nocturnal work was minimized. Lanterns illuminated paths hours before sunset. And children learned caution. The human experience became inseparable from the creature's existence. Fear and awe intertwined. Folklore became lived reality. The wolf's legend embedded into both culture and environment. By mid-July, the phantom wolf's influence had become codified in records, folklore, and memory, cross-referencing sheriff's logs, newspaper accounts. Agricultural reports, meteorological data, and oral histories revealed striking consistency. Movement patterns, environmental correlations, and behavioral observations coalesced. And yet, despite empirical grounding, the creature retained its spectral qualities. It was simultaneously measured and mysterious, tangible and ineffable. A phenomenon, both quantified and legendary. The plains themselves acknowledged its dominion, a presence that altered the fabric of human activity and shaped collective consciousness. Observers reflecting retrospectively emphasized the duality of their experience. Empirical measurement and emotional impact converged. The wolf had forced recognition of human limitations. The borderlands, long considered tamed and measured, revealed themselves as untamable, unpredictable, alive, and inhabited by something beyond ordinary comprehension. Officials, ranchers, and witnesses alike reconciled with the fact that human assumptions, strategies, and instruments were inadequate. And in that realization, the phantom wolf achieved a form of mastery, silent, patient, enduring. As the summer heat rose, reports diminished. The creature remained, but sightings became sporadic. Yet the psychological and cultural impact persisted. Families continued to adapt. Local folklore enriched with each account. Children heard stories of amber eyes glinting across ridges. The wolf became simultaneously sentinel and specter, shaping the Kansas borderlands long after its physical traces vanished. Every paw print, claw mark, and missing animal became a testament to its enduring presence. Fact and legend fused. The plains remembered, and human perception was forever altered. By the close of July 1932, the consequences of the phantom wolf's reign were unmistakable. Empirical data, eyewitness testimony, and folklore combined to create a phenomenon, both measured and mythic. The creature had outsmarted, outflanked, outproduced, leaving a permanent mark on the borderlands, a legacy of respect, fear, and enduring mystery. The plains themselves whispered of the wolf, and those who walked them carried the echo. A reminder that some forces, though unseen, leave an indelible imprint on both land and mind. As August settled over the Kansas plains, the air thickened with heat and the scent of dried prairie grass. The phantom wolf had retreated from the immediate gaze of humans, yet its presence lingered. Not in tracks or claw marks alone, but in the consciousness of those who had witnessed it, in the stories passed quietly around lantern-lit kitchens, in the wary steps of ranchers and drovers navigating the open plains. The land itself seemed to hum with memory. Every ridge, every wind-swept hollow, every river bend seemed to carry a trace of the enormous shadow that had dominated the borderlands. The plains remembered, and so did the people. Folklore once whispered only among older settlers and native communities had now fused irrevocably with fact. The windwalker, the Cimarron shadow, the ghost wolf of countless tales. It became real in the minds and memories of humans. Every encounter meticulously recorded, every paw print measured, every eyewitness testimony archived. Yet the more the wolf was documented, the more it transcended the ordinary. It was simultaneously tangible and spectral, a creature both anchored in empirical reality and elevated to legend. And in this duality, it shaped not only the Borderlands, but the human understanding of the untamed world. The plains had revealed a truth that could not be ignored. That life here was a negotiation with forces far larger and more elusive than themselves. The psychological imprint of the wolf endured. Ranchers adjusted their routines long after sightings had ceased. Livestock feeding schedules altered. Children kept indoors after dusk. Lanterns lit hours before sunset. Community watchfulness became a rhythm, a shared understanding that the plains held secrets beyond human comprehension. Even those who never saw the creature carried an awareness, a cautionary respect. The wolf's dominion extended beyond physical presence into the social fabric. It dictated patterns of behavior, reshaped expectations, and embedded itself into memory, a living echo of fear, awe, and mystery. Historical documentation continued to validate these experiences. Sheriff's logs, agricultural reports, and letters to newspapers consistently corroborated size, speed, and behavior. Paw prints measured 18 to 19 inches. Stride lengths exceeded 10 feet. Estimated speed over open prairie 35 miles per hour. Jaw strength surpassing 2,500 psi. And yet these numbers alone did not convey the full impact. The emotional weight, the sense of being observed, the alteration of routine. These were equally tangible. Human perception became a part of the record. Folklore and fact merged seamlessly, creating a narrative that was simultaneously empirical and mythic. Native oral histories preserved in WPA interviews decades later revealed remarkable parallels. Stories of enormous wolves patrolling the plains, silent and watchful, observing humans, influencing livestock, vanishing like smoke across ridges. The Windwalker had long been a guardian of the land, a spirit of oversight and caution. And the phantom wolf's observed behaviors in 1932 mirrored these tales. Pattern size, timing, and strategic movement all echoed the legend. The plains themselves seemed to acknowledge this continuity, reality and myth intertwined in the human experience. Each observation, each measure, each whispered tale reinforced the legend. And in doing so, the wolf became eternal, both fact and folklore, both remembered and unseen. Communities slowly came to terms with coexistence. Human ambition, curiosity, and vigilance, humbled by the reality of the creature's capabilities. The phantom wolf dictated what was possible, influenced how humans moved, slept, and worked. And yet in this dominion, there was a strange respect, a recognition of the untamable, the unpredictable, the wildness inherent in the land and the creatures that inhabited it, a lesson as old as the plains themselves. That humans, despite ingenuity and determination, must sometimes acknowledge forces beyond comprehension and learn to coexist in caution, in awe, in reverence. The echoes of 1932 carried into future generations. Stories preserved in diaries, letters, and newspapers were retold to children. Cautionary tales merged with factual accounts, and the phantom wolf became a symbol, a reminder of boundaries that cannot be enforced by fences or rifles alone, of power beyond measurement, of mystery that endures. Observers spoke of its patient watchfulness, its strategic movements, its intelligence beyond instinct. And in the recollection of these moments, a cultural memory was solidified, a shared consciousness among those living along the borderlands. The wolf was gone from sight, but never from mind. What if they hadn't underestimated the plains? The silence, the shadows, the vastness. What if the early settlers had understood the full magnitude of forces that moved unseen across the prairie? Would they have respected the boundaries, altered their routines sooner, or simply ignored the warning signs? Such questions linger unanswerable like echoes in the wind. The phantom wolf leaves lessons not in blood or carnage, but in observation, in adaptation, in the respect for the untamable. A predator, a spirit, a legend, all at once. And next, we'll see how the Borderlands continued to harbor unseen forces, how local legends evolved alongside fact, and how observers decades later interpreted remnants of encounters that blurred the line between reality and myth. Stories that carry forward the tension of the plains, the memory of the windwalker, and the shadow of a wolf that refused to be forgotten. The plains still whisper, and the legend endures.